In 2020, last season, we had inconsistent yield between varieties. There was definitely big winners, big losers. The big winner is definitely the quality of the fruit. It was probably one of the best seasons we've had, specifically on the border varietals that actually yielded a little bit. On the run side, a lot of the varietals had a heavy damage, and we either didn't make any or made a really low yield. However, including on the really low yield and the heavily damaged vines, the quality was very, very high. The berries were extremely small. The juice skin ratio was definitely on the skin side for the vintage. So sadly, we didn't make much wine last year, but a little bit of wine that we made is of the highest quality, maybe in line with 2017 and 2018 vintage. Definitely really great vintage in terms of quality.
Ultimately, I'm really happy with how the Texas Hill Country harvest finished. We had incredible quality. In the high plains, we had some very good quality fruit, but the quantity was incredibly low. I wouldn't call it a complete disaster in the high plains, but it definitely was a very challenging vintage, to say the least.
This is kind of the end result of what happened in, what we had in 2020. Had a really, really light crop due to a lot of, just a lot of different circumstances. I would say probably 20% of normal crop is what we had. It's definitely a setback. And what it does, it puts you in a position to where you can't have another one. Like, you have to make a crop this year. We have to make a crop this year.
For 2021, I'm jacked up. I'm jacked up over every vintage, but I'm super excited about ultimately our partnership with Lost Draw Cellars.
It was just a way that, we could see the company move forward. The synergies as far as like the amount of fruit that they were both buying from the same place, the bottling line situation where Winemakers owns the bottling line.
I think we've put 105 families together, working together for one goal, and that's our two goals, to grow and produce world-class amazing wine, to have a ton of fun, and to create an amazing place for people to work.
My dear old father started all this back in 1968 by planting the first vineyards up here on the high plains. I think there was over 140 different varieties that he planted. And then him and his sidekick, Bob Reed, professor at Tech, they got a call from some people saying, hey, they're pulling out all these old grapevines over here at Tech from the greenhouse. Y'all want them? And they went, a light bulb went off. And they said, God, do we? So they went over there and they got all these old vines and they planted them in Bob's backyard around his patio. And they didn't know what they were. They were red grapes. And they were gonna just sell grapes by the road and have in jelly, but they started making wine. And they go, what kind of grapes are these? And they go, we don't know what they are. We're just gonna call them patio. So it was patio red. And I think they had a couple of whites in there. And they started making wine, and Doc said, we ought to build a winery. And my mom was like, y'all guys are nuts. They rounded up enough investors, and they started Llano Estacado Winery. The sad thing is that they had to build it in a wet precinct back in the day. You could not have a winery in a dry precinct. And my dad said, we got to build this thing in concrete because people are going to shoot it. And they did. We built up Llano in 1998. I left and started my own label. I've been doing this for over 40 years. We're not a big winery. We probably do 28,000 cases, which is not a very big winery, which is a good size for us. Because we like to think that we may not be the biggest, but we're the best. That's just my own opinion.
All right, we are at the William Chris Wine Company barrel holding facility. What you see behind me is almost 3,500 barrels that has 3 different vintages. Fermentation is the process of yeast consuming sugar within the grapes or any other fruit. We make wine out of grapes because it's delicious, and we have yeast that eat the sugar, create alcohol, which is also the good stuff, heat, CO2, a number of different esters and aromas. Post-fermentation, you can see that lots of different things like aging in a barrel, they all make a difference on the finished product. How long you age, what kind of wood you put your barrel in, how thick the wood is, how long the wood was aged. There's so many different factors that affect the final outcome of a wine. It's pretty incredible. One of those is yeast, right? So, when we use commercial yeast here at William Chris Vineyards, and so we used to use like 9 or 10 different strains of yeast. Now I think we're down to about 6 or 5. We really started playing around with more and more ambient yeast. I say natural yeast, ambient yeast, there's yeast everywhere, right? Including this cellar. We started using the grapes themselves as inoculant, and we started allowing that yeast to start fermenting the grapes. What we got is a totally unique expression of terroir. Roughly a third of our production is not inoculated with yeast. We use the yeast that comes in from the vineyard to ferment. We don't add any yeast to get the fermentation rolling. It just naturally happens, or spontaneous fermentation as we sometimes call it, which I think in the end really gives that clear expression of where the grapes were from, because you could take Mourvedre from 2 different vineyards and let that, whatever yeast is on those grapes ferment, you'll get a different expression of both places. I think that's pretty awesome.
We're here in the barrel room at French Connection. Today we're going to be blending some wines. So we're making our new 2018 Bordeaux blend. Right next to me I have the different blending components. So here we have one of our cab sauv. So it's one of our vineyard sites of cab. We keep all the wines separate for, in this case, just about 3 years of aging. And then at this stage, we're going to be making the blend. So we're going to be selecting a few specific barrels that are going to go in the blend. So we're trying this out, and then I'll show you guys what this looks like on the blending table. So we're going to be grabbing a little sample with the wine diff of our Buena Suerte Cab Sauv from 2018. So we pull our 3 main samples, which are Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Cabernet Franc, 3 of the main grapes that we make. Now we're trying to make the next vintage of this RD blend, which is the right bank of Bordeaux style. And so those are the 3 main components in that blend. So now that we're at blending table, what we're going to do is we're going to try to find the percentages that are working for those guys. So one of the main components, or really the 2 main components in this wine, are Cabernet Franc and Merlot always. It's most of what's grown on the right bank of Bordeaux. We'll start with Merlot. We know roughly where those blends are going to land, so we have kind of an idea of what is actually going to work in this scenario. So we're putting a certain amount of Merlot. We'll put, in this case, a bigger amount of Cabernet Franc. And then there will be just a touch of Cabernet Sauvignon. So if you find yourself on the right bank of Bordeaux, in Saint-Emilion or in Pomerol, usually this is the makeup of those blends. Then we're going to taste it, and then we're going to try to make some other versions of that blend and see exactly what is the best blend that we can come up with for 2018 vintage. So 2018, we have 2017, it's in the bottle. This guy's probably going to go in the bottle in the next few weeks. 2018 is a year with a lot of tannins. So Merlot is usually one of the softer wines that we make, but in this case, Merlot and every varietal in 2018 made wines that have very, very big structures. It was a beautiful vintage for us. Both 17 and 18 were top quality vintages in Texas. But the 18 definitely has a little bit more chew and a little bit more meat on those bones. It's a beautiful blend. We're really happy with it. We're hoping that we're going to have this in the bottle in the next few weeks. We're just waiting on bottles right now.